Hey guys, I'm here. So Moon Knight dropped this week. If you haven't seen my reaction to the first episode, I recommend you go check that out because I had a blast with this one. And as you guys know, or if you're new and you don't, a new Marvel show means more breakdowns and Easter eggs to comb through that we're going to be joining Eric Voss for here today over at New Rockstars to see what all they've uncovered. So guys, if you're not subscribed to New Rockstars, I highly recommend these guys. So that said, let's just get this thing underway. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Marvel's Moon Knight Episode 1 as we meet our hero grappling with dissociative identity disorder, and one of those identities possessed by an Egyptian moon deity, which gives us all a new cover story for when we obliterate our friends' bathrooms. I swear it was Konshu shit in the tub. As we always do here at New Rockstars, we're gonna break this down in depth because unlike other MCU titles, Moon Knight is less about the Marvel Easter eggs than it is truly impressive cinematic details that make this series a fascinating mystery and character exploration. Also, our merch partners have dropped new Moon Knight inspired
I like that beanie.
shirts, a cool looking new latest obsession design, and when you get one of those, you'll get the added option to write in a custom shout out that will appear on screen in our Moon Knight after shows. So get your hands on one of those at NewRockstars.
I've nabbed quite a few of their shirts
before. The
before.
episode opens not with the hero, but with the villain, Arthur Harrow. Tattooed on his arm are scales head in the mouths of crocodiles. Those croc heads also on the head of his staff. For the Egyptian deity he serves, Amit, a funeral figure associated with judgment, seen with the head of a crocodile, front legs of a lion, and hindquarters of a hippopotamus. The Egyptians believe that when you die, the god of the dead, Anubis, weighs your heart on scales against the weight of a feather, and if it weighs more, you're fed to Amit. Amit was not worshipped as a god per se, but feared by Egyptians as the devourer of the dead, dooming them if they didn't adhere to the principle of Ma'at, which referred to a way of life that pursued truth and balance and justice. Philosophically, there's actually a lot in common here with Thanos, another MCU villain with a religious zeal to cull all of life by half. But whereas Thanos saw fairness in randomness, Harrow and his disciples believed that one's soul should be judged on its merits, past, present, and future. At least you can imagine in a post-Thanos society, one's fate being determined by a bit more order is a cult mentality Kool-Aid flavor more folks would like the taste of. In
Yeah,
ritual,
that
he
makes
shatters
sense.
a glass and then puts the broken pieces in his sandals, walking on them with bare feet. Now, walking
Considering
on
what the
glass is a
world's been
real-world
through up to
meditative
this point.
practice, but Harrow hides this inside his shoes, spending the whole day enduring great pain, but telling no one. This tells us that he is not doing this for show. He is a true believer. And the music we hear is Bob Dylan's Every Grain of Sand, one of Dylan's 80s spiritual tracks recorded after he found Jesus, became a born-again Christian. Kind of like how Arthur Harrow sees himself as a reborn evangelist. Every grain of sand refers to how Dylan saw the master's hand in every tiny particle of nature. And for Harrow, in every person, he sees Emmett's judgment. That could be another reason he walks on this broken glass. With every step, he pulverizes this glass back into grains of sand. Because that's what glass is. It's sand when it's superheated. The Marvel Studios title card has been updated so that now our new friends, the Eternals, can be seen on the inside of the R behind Rocket. And by the way, they put Rocket back where Peter Parker was in the No Way Home title card because Peter can only appear in live action titles that Sony approves of. And by approves of, I mean get some money to pay for their vampire movies. And suddenly the music changes.
Which I'll be watching tonight, so we'll see how it goes.
Love, which is about a man who wakes up every day realizing he's alone. The first line actually juxtaposes Steven's inability to remember his past love, Layla, and the third line reflects how Moonlight now shows him the way via his new soulmate, one that he is not yet aware of, Konshu, the Egyptian moon deity. And we meet Stephen Grant. Now in the comics, Stephen Grant is actually the second identity of Mark Spector. Mark is really the main figure, the badass mercenary that we start with, and Stephen is a new identity he adopts, that of an elite billionaire. But I assume this series changed Stephen to this awkward museum employee to avoid the Batman Bruce Wayne comparisons. Because when Moon Knight first came out in the Marvel comics, a lot of people considered him Marvel's Batman. Now behind Stephen's bed as he awakes are a number of texts on world history and architecture, ancient Egypt, etc. These books hovering over his head as he sleeps reflect how his dreams, or what he thinks are his dreams, take him back to that world. Now in the foreground, you can see his Rubik's Cube completed, which is interesting because while trying to stay awake, Stephen intentionally fiddles with it and tosses it, never finishing changing it, suggesting that when the Mark identity takes over, he might go ahead.
Oh, that's a
You see how
good
he strapped his
detail.
leg to the bed and surrounded himself with sand, all as a kind of sleepwalking security measure. But his first real step forward of the day is his bare foot on sand, which the camera lingers on, showing he is more connected to the sands of Egypt than Harrow, whose first step of his day is on larger chunks of glass. His goldfish Gus has only one working fin, like Nemo, a comparison the pet's owner later invokes. But with one working fin, this poor guy is literally swimming in circles just like Steven is. And you can see at the bottom of the fish tank is lined with a pyramid, King Tut's head, an Egyptian obelisk, and a sunken boat. He talks to his mother on the phone, probably talking to no one.
Hello, Mum. It's me. Just checking in. I got your postcard. Putting it up on Gus's tank now.
Now, assuming Steven's mother doesn't really exist, is he sending himself these postcards? Is Mark sending them to Steven to help keep him in that dormant routine? Later on in the gift shop, we do see a
I was
rack of
kind of like
postcards,
puzzled
so
about
perhaps this is where he's getting
who he's
postcards
actually
he's
talking
mailing
to.
himself. He says goodbye to his mom by saying,
Anyway, sorry I missed you, Mum. I'll try again tomorrow. Laters, Gators.
yes, crocodiles are different from alligators. We talked about this in Loki, but it will be later that he faces this taxonomic order of reptiles. But also, this all poses the question, if Stephen Grant is just another identity of Mark Spector, who does Stephen think he is talking on the phone to? Is he just leaving voicemails with a random number? Is there a voice inbox that Mark Spector set up to help Stephen along with this charade? It's just interesting how all of Stephen's closest relationships are people who cannot talk back to him, like the street performer Crawley. Now, behind that bus is a building Atlantis Island.
I feel so
maybe
bad
like
for
Marvel's
Steven, man.
Atlantis, home of Namor, or maybe just another building called Atlantis. They actually shot all the London exteriors in Budapest. So later, when we see what's supposed to be London's National Museum of Art, the architecture is actually that of Budapest's Museum of Fine Arts. They used VFX to swap out the Hungarian for English. And this museum is first shown in the reflection of a puddle that Steven steps through. Reflections and mirrored surfaces are a recurring motif in this series, all a way of showing how Steven connects with his other identities. Steven catches a girl stuffing her gum in a mini pyramid of Giza.
It's not like there's anything in there.
Yeah, maybe not. But in there, something wicked.
A line foreshadowing in two ways. Of course, the wicked jackal that Steven will flee in this museum later, but also trailer footage suggests that Steven or Mark will explore the Great Pyramids of Giza and they might find something inside of them.
Yeah.
Also, something wicked is a quote from Shakespeare's Macbeth, the witches who say, "By the pricking of my tomes, something wicked this way comes." In the play, the witches are foreseeing a monster of their own making, Macbeth, just like how for Steven, the hero of this story, the monster is currently inside of him. He explains the Egyptian burial ritual and how their hearts were judged, and the girl responds with,
And did it suck for you? Getting rejected from the field of reeds?
Well, that don't make sense, because I'm not dead, am I?
Stevie.
yeah, I love that second, am I? That Oscar Isaac sneaks in, showing how this girl triggered his recent lapses with reality. Even now, he doesn't know if he's alive or dead. Also, weird question for that girl to ask. I don't trust that kid. Later, while doing inventory
She's part of
with
the cult,
Donna,
too.
he hands her the stuffed hippos, then moves to a box containing the stuffed lions and the stuffed crocodiles. Together, these three are the anatomical components of Emmett. He points to a flaw on the poster.
That's an... Oh, look at the winged figure and the... making the crescent moon.
Stop.
There's been a major blunder because they've got 7 gods here and the Ennead has 9.
Now, he is correct that the Ennead of Egyptian mythology has 9 members. The sun god Atum, his children Shu and Tefnut, their children Geb and Nut, and then their children Osiris, Isis, and Set and Nephthys. And then sometimes the Ennead includes Horus, son of Osiris and Isis. But this poster also lists Hathor, the sky goddess, who is not usually listed among the Ennead, despite being a very important deity who, we should note, mates with Konshu, the moon deity, to enable creation. But based on promo material, we will likely see the 9 members of the Ennead in their human avatars later this season. Steven chats with his gold-painted street performer listed in the credits as Crawley. Now in the comics, Bertrand Crawley is a homeless man in New York who serves as an informant to Moon Knight. He walks around posing as a British aristocrat. We get another awesome puddle mirror.
This
here.
would be a good
Steven
way
says
to
goodbye
pick up
Crawley.
on some
What we initially think is right side
intel.
up is actually upside down when a leaf drops on the puddle on the top half of the frame. As Steven tries
So
to stay
good,
awake, in
man.
his textbook, there's a mention of of the Great Rift, gods turn away from man, which feels like it's setting up this show's mythology with Konshu and the 9 Ennead members' relationship to mankind. We're essentially adding a new layer to the MCU plan of implying all gods of human society from the history we know are interwoven with the Marvel mythology, as we saw with the Asgardians' connections with Norse mythology and the Eternals' connections with all other forms of mythology. We have yet to see how the Christian religion ties into all of that, but my friends, Mephisto is. If this textbook is supposed to be showing the familial lineage of the Ennead, even if it's going youngest to oldest, it does seem a bit out of order. It's just a bit odd to list Osiris first, whatever order you would go in. But remember, all of this is through the eyes of Stephen, who's certainly knowledgeable about Egyptian mythology, but he does have an unstable mind. He is an unreliable narrator, a point of view character through whom we are not seeing objective reality necessarily. So who knows how much of this presented reality is actually real and how much of it is going to be revealed as a fantasy at some point. He tosses up his Rubik's Cube and he suddenly finds himself face down, jaw dislocated in the hills beside an alpine village. This is actually shot in Slovenia.
That made my jaw
apparently,
ache
Stephen
a little
fell asleep.
bit
Mark Spector
when I
took
saw
over,
it.
went to the Alps to steal the scarab from this castle, then leapt out the window, and Stephen woke up on the ground. A voice speaks to him.
Go back to sleep, worm.
Yes, this is F. Murray Abraham as Konshu. Interesting that he calls Stephen the worm, as if Stephen is the invasive critter that does not belong inside the mind. Konshu, of course, the Egyptian moon deity, possessed Mark Spector, choosing him as his avatar, giving Mark supernatural powers, but he has less control over Mark's Stephen identity. In his pocket, he finds a golden scarab with the Egyptian hieroglyphics. You can actually see a closer look at these in the closing credits of the episode. We did our best to translate these, but they do contain a mix of known alphabet symbols and then other unknown ones. The right and the left halves of the scarab are mirrored, so if you look at the dividing line in the middle and go to the column to the right of that, at the top of that, that is a reed, which translates to either an E or an I beside a seated figure. Beneath that, there's a scarab shape, then the open mouth, that's an R, then another I beside a different seated figure, then a pair of figures. The column to the right of that is topped with the quail chick that represents the U or the W, followed by another I. Beneath that, the vulture, that's an A, and then a figure I don't recognize that looks like either a boat or maybe an oil lamp, and then the horned viper that represents F, and then another figure I don't recognize.
kind of see a turtle.
I'm gonna keep looking at these folks, but all you Egyptologists out there, hit me up. This series has been described as Indiana Jones meets Fight Club, and already you're seeing the parallels there, of course, especially Indiana Jones' The Last Crusade, which had a whole set piece in a Germanic castle. But by sticking with one man's point of view, his consciousness suddenly switching into a totally different context is something that we've seen actually in Christopher Nolan's Memento, which is also told in a non-linear narrative structure that reflected the mind of the protagonist who suffered from short-term memory loss. It resulted in him
I
finding himself in intense
haven't
moments
seen
with no knowledge of
Memento.
how he got there. Similarly, the FX series Legion, which actually follows the Marvel mutant of David Haller, also explores the intersection of superpowers with mental health.
Also haven't
struggles,
seen
and
Legion.
leaves the viewer never quite sure of what is real or not. Interesting how in this scene all the shooters speak to each other in English.
What's he doing? He's heading for the village.
Just a little indicator that these men in their matching clothes are likely not native to this alpine town, but rather like many
Good
cults
point.
in the real world.
I didn't think
moved
about
to
that
these
when I was
places and
watching
just
it.
kinda, like take the town over with their interesting Rajneeshni outfits. Stephen pulls a Harrison Ford fugitive maneuver by joining the procession with some headgear to blend in. In this case, it's his white hoodie, white being the color of Moon Knight's wardrobe. Arthur Harrow parts the crowd, showing his long blown out hair. Now Harrow in the comics is really a one-off villain from one issue in 1985, a guy with a half paralyzed face carrying out some Nazi experiments in Mexico. Really, I think this guy's gonna have a deeper identity that gets revealed later in the series. Ethan Hawke said his version of the character is based on David Koresh, leader of the Christian cult, the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. One follower submits himself for
Okay.
judgment.
I judge you in Amit's name with but a fraction of her power.
The tattoo scales sync with the swinging of the staff, which turn green to signal a balanced soul. Meanwhile, the old woman, the tattoo turns red, with one scale having a larger pile weighing it down.
I've been good my entire life.
I believe you, but the scales see everything. Perhaps it's something that lies ahead.
And so he drains her life force, leaving her skin gray. So Emmett judges her by the sins she will commit in the future. And unless this is all bullshit, and let's be honest, it might be, this would be another example.
Question about that. I just thought about this now is like maybe it was something that will be. If he sucked her soul out now, he prevented whatever it was she was going to do regardless. So isn't that interference? Or no? I mean, that's what he was talking about. Well, later we'll get to it with talking about preventing like all these like global tragedies if certain people were kind of judged earlier. So yeah, he's removing evil, I guess. So for whatever she was going to do eventually, down the road, possibly, or maybe she's done something she doesn't know about, or maybe she's done something, I don't know. It's really interesting to think about that. What I just thought about it, I was like, yeah, he just kind of prevented whatever she was going to do. Kind of Minority Report in a kind of way, predictive crime.
Of destiny existing in the MCU, something described in various ways by the Ancient One and He Who Remains in Loki. Like the TVA pruning young Sylvie, this woman is being punished for future violations. Both of these systems of justice cruelly denying the possibility of a multiverse where people can make infinitely different choices. Konshu refuses to let Steven hand over the scarab. Kudos to Oscar Isaac for his physical work here, the way he can divorce his head and facial expressions from the rest of his body. And then when he marches away
really
from Harrow,
good.
He takes these big dramatic steps, similar to the big strides the towering Konshu himself would take. As they pry the scarab from him, Steven flickers in and out of consciousness, coming to with blood
God, I
on
love
his
this.
face and fist. Just that amount of blood on the scarab in his palm is some of the gruesomest we've ever seen the MCU get, as it implies he may have had to rip off a few fingers to get that scarab out of their hands. He flees in a cupcake delivery van that plays Wham's Wake Me Up, another cry for help as Steven wishes to be woken up from this nightmare. The fact that this is playing on the radio, maybe just a bit of an ironic joke, or just like an interesting coincidence that one might see in a dream. Stephen Grant wakes up for this thinking it's a dream, but as we find out later, it's not a dream. So why did such an ironic song play during it then? I just love how this show blurs the lines for what seems real and what seems fantasy. As he struggles against his pursuers, he flashes forward again and now
I loved it. Oh my God, it's so good.
The gunshot shattered the side window and one of those pursuing cars flipping.
That dude in the back dead.
Classic car chase with one person steering, one person shooting, but with one man doing everything and only seeing half of it. Think how terrifying that would be. A logging truck overturns and he swerves around it. Two more trucks wedge around him, and then Mark takes over again. Yeah, I like how on the transition out of it, you hear the gunshot, as if the gunshot is what woke Steven up. The gunshot that probably shot the driver of that sedan. But before the logs crush him, Steven wakes up, he thinks back home. Presumably, Mark was able to get out of that somehow, made his way back to the UK, back into the apartment, back into bed. And a shot from behind proves this, showing Steven with reflections on either side of him, proving his truly split identity. Yet his leg harness, the sand ring, the door tape, all seemingly undisturbed. But think about it, if it was another identity taking over, not
They could just put everything back in
Mark would have
place.
been fully capable of avoiding the sand, replacing the tape himself. It's a huge pile of crumbled tape in that trash can. I highly doubt Steven counted all the wads. But Gus now has a second fully functioning fin. As indicated by the pet store clerk, Mark during that lapse period must have replaced the goldfish.
Why'd he put him in a blender?
When the fish die and they hope the kids don't notice. Steven realizes he missed his date at the steak restaurant because it's Sunday, not Friday.
I'll have a steak, please.
Sure. What cut would you like?
I'll have the best bit of the steak. That's the bit that I want.
Center cut's fillet. And how'd you like that?
Good. Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah.
I'll put you for well done.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. That sounds delicious.
Oof, for anyone who eats steak, this is painful to watch. You never cook a fillet to be well done. You're ruining it.
I'd rather eat poodle shit.
But obviously, Steve is a vegan, and Mark was the meat eater who picked this steakhouse.
Yeah.
He finds some scratches on his apartment floor for where the table was dragged over to access the hidden crawl space, and on the cell phone that he finds, all the calls are to Layla, except one listing Ducamp. Jean-Paul Ducamp is a mercenary and ex-French Foreign Legion officer who is a partner to Mark Spector in the comics. Mark's voice speaks to him, and he sees the reflection in the bathroom mirror shaking his head when Steven hadn't done so. He flees to the elevator, which stops mysteriously on an empty third floor, and then again on the second, where Konshu lurches toward him from the end of the hall. Terrifying horror imagery here. As in the comics, Konshu has a beaked skull and a crescent moon staff, and his limbs are wrapped in linen like a mummy, though I like how his tail wrappings seem to float as if detached from gravity. Just amazing character design here. Konshu grabbing the lift door turns it into an elderly woman, but even that doesn't make total sense if you think about it, because if she was at the other end of the hall, she would be nowhere near the summoning button. And despite this elevator previously headed down from the second floor, it's now back up on the fifth floor, where his elderly neighbor is visiting her friend, Claire. And we saw Steven repeatedly hit the button for the ground floor, it should not have gone back up to the 5th. Now, sure, this may just be the building's electrical problems that Stephen alluded to, or maybe Konshu screwing with him, but really I think another example of how basic things in Stephen's reality are not abiding by normal logic. Stephen turns around and sees Konshu right behind him. I love this close-up because you can see all the texturing and indentations on Konshu's skull, like the little hairs wafting out from the back of it. But now when we whip pan to Stephen's reaction, he's back on the bus, meaning from the 5th floor to now, Mark must have been in control. We see Konshu standing on the street, but he disappears when the lamppost crosses frame. On his bus, Stephen realizes as he hops off, Harrow was on that bus. So either Mark was pursuing, or more likely being pursued by Arthur Harrow before Stephen regained control. Harrow and his followers corner Stephen at the museum.
Forgot about that.
Had Amit been free, she would have prevented Hitler and the destruction he wrought.
This is what I was talking about earlier.
The Armenian genocide, Pol Pot.
While alluding to history's worst crimes against humanity, Harrow invokes the baby Hitler thought experiment. What if Hitler could have been prevented from becoming the mass murdering dictator? Something Deadpool 2 addresses head on. Harrow goes on to say,
But she was betrayed
Was she?
by indolent fellow gods.
Oh,
By even her own avatar.
avatars. Blue people.
By avatar,
You mean that?
what I mean.
Anime.
yeah, Stephen
It's not an
references both
anime.
James Cameron's Avatar and Avatar The Last Airbender, but also setting up the mystery of who Amit's original avatar was and why they betrayed Amit. Perhaps influences from the Eternals, or maybe Pharaoh Rama Tut, aka Kang the Conqueror, who also judges people by their futures. When Harrow tries to
Forgot
assess
about that.
Stephen's soul, Amit's scales never settle.
There's chaos in you.
That's because Stephen has a completely different moral alignment than Mark does. And the destiny of this total individual is really a complete variable depending on whoever is taking control. Now, would that mean that anyone with dissociative identity disorder that Harrow assessed would get the same result? Maybe, but I really think Stephen and Mark's
That's a good
condition
point
is
to-
amplified by Konshu's possession, making him uniquely
to bring up.
impossible to judge. That night as the museum closes, the crescent moon glimmers overhead, foretelling this as the night Moon Knight will finally rise. Stephen passes his reflections, and the two others remain in the glass. Mark turning back to see what is stalking Stephen, in this case the jackal that moves in the foreground, a jackal released by Arthur Harrow to recover the scarab. In another shot, Stephen is perfectly framed behind a half-broken bust. Just a really cool way of showing how he is sharing his mind with one of these ancient figures. The jackal appears again behind statues, its eyes glowing. Super creepy. Stephen flees into the largest and nicest public museum bathroom I've ever seen.
Stephen, I could save us. But I can't have you fighting me this time. You need to give me control. You understand?
I love how for all of this, we stay in one take, transitioning through whip pans, but staying in Stephen's point of view. At first, the Mark reflection turns to face him while all the other infinite Stephen reflections match Stephen's movement, but after Stephen turns to look at the door and then back to Mark, now only the Mark reflection is there in the mirror. So there may be other infinite identities in this mind, but Mark has the full attention right now. And then the music cuts out as he says,
You're not gonna die. Let me save us.
And so Stephen finally looks directly at Mark into his eyes, and the transformation begins. Though notice, while the mummy wrappings envelop our Mark/Stephen, in the mirror reflections on the side, nothing is happening. Again, from the standpoint of objective reality, it's hard to really know how much of this is truly real. Flickering on the bathroom walls are glowing hieroglyphics, and then we cut to outside the bathroom, initially hearing
I
the
love
scuffle,
this.
but then Sink crashes against the wall, and the jackal tries to flee, but Moon Knight tracks him back.
Yeah,
Water
get away,
pouring down
bud.
the broken sinks, giving us another mirrored surface to reflect this character from below. He turns to us, glowing white eyes from behind the mummy wrappings and a hood with a crescent moon sigil and a beaked tip of that hood, evoking the skull of Konshu. Suspended in his chest, in those mummy wrappings, is his crescent moon weapon. Our final image of the episode leaves us with Moon Knight's eyes, glowing white like the moon. The color white is important to Moon Knight, described amazingly in Charlie Houston's 2006 comics. I don't wear white to hide myself. I wear it so they'll see me coming, so they'll know who it is. Because when they see white, it doesn't matter how good a target I am. Their hands shake so bad they couldn't hit the moon. I just love how this sequence began with our fear for the glowing eyes of the jackal, and it ends with the jackal being afraid of its prey, taking on the glowing, terrifying eyes of the hunter. Again, check out our awesome Moon Knight merch over at NewRockstarsMerch.com.
I love it. It was a
Follow me on
really
Instagram,
great
Twitter at EA.
first episode, I think. It's definitely up there as one of my favorite premieres. It might even be my favorite premiere, but then again, like, who knows? I ride the high of these things for quite a while after we watch them. So I think we'll really kind of see how that levels out once we get a little bit farther away from it. But it was intense. Oscar Isaacs did a really great job. I think the cinematography in the episode was really good, especially what they play. Like Eric called out, like all the ways they play with reflections, all these little details in the background, showing there are multiple people living in his loft. Like it's really interesting. Like, trying to analyze what is going on around Steven. Because, yeah, there was some things I was like, was that a continuity error? Is he being messed with? Is he not fully conscious? Is his perception altered? Like, there's a lot of questions that I kind of had when we were watching it. And it's like, I mean, who knows? Who knows at this point? But it definitely gave me some... I like all the different kind of horror elements that it invokes, especially the elevator sequence, which reminded me of Annabelle, which was one of the few sequences in that first movie that was actually pretty tense and tension building. The action sequence with the van, brilliant, love it. And Oscar Isaacs again, playing these multiple parts is, I'm sure, challenging, especially when it comes down to where he had to still be Steven but have the body doing the other thing. Like that's some control right there that is expertly done. And I like what they're doing with Ethan's character, which is going to be fun to see how that evolves. Like the whole cult leadership thing, him with his own kind of like justice that he's trying to bring to the world. I'm excited, man. I'm really excited to see where this whole thing goes. But guys, what did you think of this breakdown? What did you think of the first episode? Sound off the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video. Feel free to join us in our Discord. We could talk about it there as well. Links to that and all my socials in the description box below. If you're not subscribed to New Rockstars, go hit that button over there for those guys. Their link will also be in the description down below. And yeah, before we go, I want to shout out our channel legends, Manny Sherritt, Ryan, Karen, Philly Vane, Yori, Corey Scott, Margaret Grace, Mary Bradley, Nate Prouty, and Melita. Thank you guys, as always, for your continued support and everybody who's been tuning into the channel. But that's it for this one, and I'll see you guys next week with the next episode of Moon Knight and the next breakdown. Take care, everybody.